Tonight, a Canadian show of strength at the White House. Premiers make a personal push and establish a red line.
About the 51st state comment where we underlined that was a non-starter.
The response, and is it enough to stave off steep tariffs?
Canada very much has their attention.
Donald Trump's high-stakes call with Vladimir Putin, what it means for the war in Ukraine. How much snow Ontario and Quebec will get, and what could be the biggest storm of the season. Plus, declining car thefts across the country, the province being left behind. And bringing pomp and ceremony to the Invictus Games. Meet the Canadian military musicians who shared the stage with pop superstars.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. For the first time, every single one of Canada's premiers was in Washington today to convince some of Donald Trump's top aides to drop the threat of tariffs. CTV's Judy Trin is in the U.S. Capitol tonight and starts us off with the impact of that FaceTime.
It took an hour for Canada's premiers to clear White House security. Once inside, they got the same amount of time to plea against tariffs.
We appreciate the Trump administration facilitating this literally in the last minute, and we're grateful. We listened, we communicated.
The premiers weren't in the Oval Office. Instead, they met with the president's deputy chief of staff and the director of personnel. Officials just outside the ring of top advisors.
We had frank conversations about the 51st state comment where we underlined that was a non-starter.
But the message may not have made a difference. Later, James Blair, the deputy chief of staff, clarified, "We never agreed that Canada would not be the 51st state. To understand President Trump, take what he says at face value." That's what Federal Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc was told as well. He met with Howard Lutnick, the incoming Commerce Secretary. In their meeting, LeBlanc says he got clarity on how the Trump administration will assess Canada's progress on fighting fentanyl and tightening border security.
We now have, I think, a good understanding of their process markers over the next number of weeks. And they were very clear that Canada very much has their attention.
A 25% tariff on all Canadian goods that are linked to border concerns could be coming as soon as March 4th, after Canada got a 30-day pause. And just this week, Trump announced a separate 25% global tariff on steel and aluminum. That disproportionately impacts Canada, the biggest exporter of those metals to the U.S., hammering home that what matters most to Trump is putting America first.
He's using it, yes, as a negotiating leverage point, but also I think he's very keen on raising revenue for other objectives that he has.
Next week, several premiers will return to the U.S. Capitol to meet with a group of state governors in hopes they can help change Donald Trump's mind. Omar.
Judy Trin in Washington, where Canada's new fentanyl czar will be heading soon to meet with Trump's border czar. Kevin Brosseau, a former Mountie, is being tasked with making Donald Trump happy by tightening up security at the border.
Bringing that integrated approach, bringing the teams together, ensuring the collaboration, ensuring the communication is happening at officials level on both sides of the border in communities across the country.
The U.S. president wants Canada to bring the already low percentage of fentanyl being smuggled into the U.S. down to zero. Security and defense were on the agenda as the Prime Minister wrapped up meetings in Brussels. There's pressure to increase NATO spending while countering Trump's repeated calls for Canada to become the 51st state. CTV's Rachel Aiello reports.
In turbulent times, we all need reliable, trustworthy partners.
The Prime Minister is focused on friendshoring, but he's yet to put a trip on the books to talk to Canada's closest ally. Have you had any conversations with him about you going down to D.C., trying to sort out your tensions in person?
We have talked about that. As you know, we have had many different conversations over the past many months.
Trudeau has been abroad since Saturday, trying to strengthen trade and defense alliances. But Trump, while not even on the same continent, remained an almost constant presence. From a brief interaction Trudeau had with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance on the sidelines of an AI summit,
it was just a quick greeting exchange,
to his meetings with allies, including those he had today at the seat of the European Council.
European Union and Canada also prove that trade agreements are clearly better than trade tariffs.
EU countries are grappling with the same American unpredictability.
Trust is very much needed.
Today, Trudeau also met privately with the NATO Secretary General to affirm Canada's commitment. The government has long been criticized for failing to meet its goal on defense spending. Trump has added a new sense of urgency as the U.S. Commander-in-Chief has his eyes on other countries' contributions.
If you look at Canada, it would be cherished as a 51st state. They don't pay their share of military in NATO.
But Trudeau is leaving Europe, and there's been no change to the government's timeline for meeting the spending target. Even with Canada's defense minister saying Trump's threats are concerning.
We will always stand up for our nation, our country, and we are not vulnerable to anybody's ambitions.
Trudeau's trip, one of his last as Prime Minister, is over. But Defense Minister Bill Blair is staying behind for additional meetings with allies. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Brussels.
In some fast-moving diplomacy today, the U.S. president announced talks with Russia's President Vladimir Putin to try and end the war in Ukraine. It's been 3 years since Russia invaded. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joey Malbin on the steps to kickstart peace negotiations.
American teacher Mark Fogel imprisoned in Russia for 3 years at the White House, praising President Donald Trump.
I feel like the luckiest man on earth.
Fogel's return a goodwill gesture from Russia that led to a dramatic prisoner swap with a Russian cyber criminal and a friendly 90-minute phone call between Trump and Russia's President Vladimir Putin, both agreeing to begin negotiations immediately to end the war in Ukraine.
We had a great call, and it lasted for a long time, over an hour this morning. I also had with President Zelensky a very good call after that. Then I think we're on the way to getting peace.
Trump, who promised to end the war in 24 hours, agreed to Putin's demand, denying Ukraine NATO membership.
Ukraine cannot go into NATO, and I'm okay with that.
And when asked if Ukraine's President Zelensky is being sidelined,
it's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace.
Meeting with NATO allies, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing a major shift in U.S. policy, delivering a blunt message to Ukraine.
We must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective.
And telling European leaders future security is now up to them. It's a bitter blow to Ukraine and President Zelensky, who offered a deal to Trump, Ukrainian rare earth minerals in exchange for military aid.
But Ukraine's going to have to cut a deal that the Americans are brokering right now. No choice, because alternatively, they would have to fight without American support.
Peace negotiations start as soon as Friday in Munich, and President Trump plans to sit down with President Putin in Saudi Arabia, opening a new chapter in Russian relations. Omar?
Joy Malbin in Washington. A series of monster snowstorms are clobbering the U.S. A parade of winter storms buried parts of the Midwest and Northeast. Mississippi dealing with tornadoes, while heavy rains flooded roads in Alabama. Roads across several states and highways a mess, with wrecks piling up and drivers stranded. Thousands of flights have been delayed or canceled. Here at home, Eastern Canada is getting slammed with what is expected to be the biggest winter storm of the year. Up to 40 centimetres in parts of Quebec and Ontario. And as CTV's Beth McDonnell reports, the system has already slammed Toronto.
As the snow and wind picked up during the evening commute, a medical emergency on the subway sent riders into the storm looking for shuttle buses as drivers braved the roads.
Really difficult for the people here, yeah. A lot of cars crash and...
Have snow tires on your car would be my primary piece of advice if you're going to drive. a lot of people seem to disobey that one.
Up to 25 centimetres of blowing snow is expected. Ontario Provincial Police are urging motorists to stay off highways and streets unless necessary.
If you absolutely need to be out on the roads, you need to make sure you understand you're driving through different conditions. Dry roads, wet roads, slippery roads, slushy roads, snow-covered roads, or anything in between.
With the Greater Toronto Area under a snowfall warning, city officials are telling residents it could take longer than normal to dig out, as 1,400 pieces of equipment are deployed.
This is a all-hands-on-deck operation.
People out braving the blast on foot are making the best of it.
We go many years without getting like real snowstorms, and this year we've had a few, so yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Many even hoping the storm is big enough for a snow day.
Fingers crossed that every single one of my plans will be canceled.
The snow and the wind from the storm is expected to taper off tomorrow, but that's not the end of the snow for the GTA. More is in the forecast on Saturday and Sunday. Omar?
All right, Beth, stay safe. CTV meteorologist Julie Atchison joins me now. Julie, walk us through the next 24 hours. What can we expect and who will be hardest hit?
Thanks so much, Omar. We have a big winter storm barreling towards southern Ontario tonight. A myriad of warnings, everything from freezing rain warnings along the northern shoreline of Lake Erie to heavy snowfall warnings in London and winter storm warnings as we head toward Grey County, Oxford County as well. Snowfall amounts across the region varying as this system comes in. There's some warm air working its way in, so snowfall amounts near the lower Great Lakes, so Lake Erie and Lake Ontario will be less as some ice pellets and the potential for freezing rain mixes in. You can see as the warm air starts to come in, so overnight temperatures will be rising, so we'll be near the freezing mark by tomorrow morning, which will lead to a bit of mixing. So all of this action comes through overnight. That's when we'll see the heaviest amount of snowfall, and first thing tomorrow morning in the GTA, it's going to be a rough commute across the region. Snowfall amounts, as I mentioned, varying significantly across the region as we head towards Midwestern Ontario, the Bruce Peninsula. We could see upwards of about 25 to 30 centimeters. In and around Toronto, near the lakeshore, snowfall amounts less, about 10 to 15. And north of that, we could see snowfall amounts reaching about 25 centimeters. Towards the London area, about 10 to 20. We're in for a rough night and a rough morning commute. Back to you.
Challenging indeed. All right, Julie, thank you. From the battle against the elements to fighting car thefts now, and some encouraging news. The number of stolen vehicles dropped last year compared to the year before, but it still remains an issue. And in one province, thieves are shifting tactics. CTV's Kathy Lee explains.
Under the veil of darkness, thieves get to work. They target this black BMW and a white Audi.
It's just been stressful all the way around.
Gerard Alladin says both vehicles were inside his garage. The suspects took a garage opener from his truck parked out front to gain access.
And then they broke into our garage door, into the house. My wife, she doesn't want to live here. She wants to sell the house now.
Tens of thousands of people countrywide have gone through the same nightmare. And while a new report shows Canada's auto theft rate for personal vehicles dropped by almost 90% last year compared to the year before, the number of stolen vehicles is still high.
There's still a crisis at hand, but I think it's a good indication that some of the things that have been put into place is having an effect.
Measures such as enhanced law enforcement strategies, part of a broader federal action plan. But in Alberta, it now has the highest per capita vehicle theft rate, and thieves are shifting away from older trucks often used to commit crimes and then abandoned to newer, more expensive cars. From there, vehicle identification numbers are changed, making them untraceable, and then they're exported.
These vehicles are basically stolen under the cover of night and taken on the highway or otherwise straight to a shipping port where they could get the vehicle overseas in a hurry.
Which are usually used for organized crime. Gerard isn't quite sure where his vehicles would have ended up. Police arrested the suspect swiftly and his cars were recovered but damaged. His focus now, moving forward and being prepared.
We had to purchase an alarm system, we extra deadbolts on our house, we bought a club for the truck.
But even with all these measures, it still doesn't take away the trauma his family has endured. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
The hero off-duty RCMP officer who stepped in to stop a stabbing suspect is speaking out about that terrifying incident at a Winnipeg church.
I did go up to the altar. I did arrest the individual who was involved here, and I was joined by other parishioners very quickly. Luckily, nobody got hurt. and the service continued.
Tony Zildowski was attending Mass when a man tried to stab a priest during the service. The priest says he has no memory of ever seeing the suspect. And a dramatic rescue in Brazil as firefighters race to get people out of a fire at a clothing factory. Several people trapped by the flames could be seen in a window near the roof. At least 20 people were injured, half of those critically. Coming up.
Catching it early is imperative.
The disease on the rise in young women. The human and economic toll of cancer is front and center once again. The Canadian Cancer Society estimates the number of new breast cancer patients likely hit an all-time high last year. A somber milestone that doctors and cancer survivors hope will resonate with women across the country. CTV's Adrian Gabriel has the story.
Each year, millions of Canadians visit a breast imaging center, with tens of thousands receiving a dire diagnosis.
I had a highly aggressive cancer, which is why I ultimately needed chemo.
In May 2023, Robbie Spring was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 35. Just 2 months earlier, Spring's 43-year-old sister was also told she had breast cancer. It was a crushing blow for their entire family, considering that 5 years earlier, their mother had also been diagnosed with the same disease.
I just didn't want to call my mom. How can I tell her that she's actually has 2 daughters going through cancer at the same time?
The Spring family is just one example of a growing number of new patients.
As a first-line worker, I'm very well aware of the increase in patients that we're seeing.
According to Statistics Canada data that excludes Quebec, there were nearly 21,000 new cases of breast cancer across the rest of the country in 2019. The Canadian Cancer Society estimates that number increased to 30,800 last year.
We know that during COVID, there was a less number of people being diagnosed with cancer. We now anticipate that we will see that number come in at a much higher rate.
At Toronto's North York General Hospital, the influx of new patients since 2019 has increased 166%.
You hear that number, you're on the front lines here at the hospital. What goes through your mind?
The greatest number of increasingly newly diagnosed patients are the under 50-year-old patients.
Ontario recently joined BC, Saskatchewan, and Atlantic Canada in granting women as young as 40 a mammogram if they request one. In Alberta and Manitoba, the age is 45. Quebec is currently reviewing their policy. Now at 37 years of age, Spring still wouldn't qualify anywhere in the country.
The younger you are, the more likely it is you have an aggressive type of cancer, but breast cancer. And so catching it early is imperative.
For Robbie Spring, she hopes her personal breast cancer journey, as well as her family's, serves as an awakening for women across Canada to advocate for themselves. Adrian Gabriel, CTV News, Toronto.
Still ahead. Game on at the Four Nations Face-Off, and what other tournament is making a comeback? Well, the puck has dropped in Montreal for the Four Nations Face-Off.
Back from Crosby, back to Crosby. What a goal to start it off.
Nathan McKinnon scoring first for Canada in the opening game against Sweden. USA plays Finland tomorrow, with the final set for next week in Boston. The tournament, featuring NHL players, is part of several high-profile events for the sport. The Winter Olympics are next year, and the league announced tonight that the World Cup of Hockey will make a return in 2028.
For Best in Show at the 149th Annual Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show, I choose the Giant Schnauzer.
That's Monty taking home the club's top honor on his third try, becoming the first of his breed to win the title. Monty's owner says when he's not competing, he likes playing with soccer balls and laying on the couch.
It was incredible. This is actually my 10th time seeing Paul McCartney. I have no words for it.
The Beatles legend greeted fans outside New York's Bowery Ballroom after playing to a crowd of just 500 people. McCartney announced the show just hours before taking to the stage, sending people scrambling for tickets. As to what led to the surprise show, McCartney told the crowd, why not? Love the spontaneity. Still ahead. The uniformed artists headlining a celebration of courage in the face of adversity. We leave you tonight with some magical moments from the Invictus Games in Vancouver for a group of Canadian military musicians who got to share the stage with some big-name superstars. Here's CTV's Anna McMillan.
The Naden Band at CFB Esquimalt is known for bringing the pomp to ceremonial events. And last Saturday, they did just that with the help of some famous faces.
When you first watch our chief coming out as the drum major and you have everybody following it and then you have Katy Perry coming in between, that is a picture I'm going to remember in my mind forever.
Canadian Navy musicians traveled from Esquimalt to Vancouver to perform with Perry during the opening ceremony of the Invictus Games.
We were downstairs in the tunnel getting ready to go on. All of a sudden, Katy Perry appeared, and she was just a normal, regular, everyday human being.
They were joined by military musicians from Vancouver and Edmonton, and another recognizable performer. Coldplay's Chris Martin.
We knew it was going to be a lot of work, and it really was. We had to record, and we had to get all of the backing tracks ready so that we were prepared by the time we actually got to the stage. And when we did, it went off without a hitch.
And to sing O Canada, Petty Officer Second Class Cindy Hotchuk.
For Cindy Hotchuk, a different task, singing the national anthem in front of thousands at BC Place.
I was able to look at all the athletes and I was just completely overwhelmed with emotion. I've sung the anthem a lot in my life and I've never felt that way.
For the musicians, Perry and Martin's presence was awe-inspiring, and equally moving was the presence of military athletes from roughly 25 countries.
The spirit in that room and that feeling of community, I've never experienced in a stadium like that before.
More memories will be made on Saturday when the Naden Band performs at the closing ceremony.
It was something that I know I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my days.
Anna McMillan, CTV News.
They are excellent. And you can watch our exclusive interview with the founder of the Invictus Games, Prince Harry, in a CTV News special tomorrow night on CTV and ctvnews.ca.